And I now give the floor to the distinguished delegate of Cabo Verde. Cabo Verde, you have the floor.
Je te rappelle à partir de 18h. Je suis très pris aujourd'hui. Je te rappelle à partir de 18h. Je dis que je te rappelle à 18h. Je suis tellement pris aujourd'hui.
Ok, je vais vous poser alors. Moi, je vais donc.
Does Cabo Verde wish to take the floor? Okay, this brings us to the list of delegates, at the end of the list. I now recognize the distinguished delegate representing the FAO. FAO, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for giving me the floor. As a member of the Interagency Advisor Group, the FAO collaborates to support delivery of SDG Target 15.3 through relevant FAO programs and initiatives that have assisted countries to advance in the achievement of LDN targets. Specifically on this, we like to draw to the parties' attention FAO's ongoing work on supporting sustainable land management at local and national level through land resource planning and decision support to mainstreaming and scaling up sustainable land management. FAO is a member of the GeoLDN initiative and has developed relevant open source tools for the assessment and monitoring of land, water, and natural resources, such as Open Forests, EarthMap, and Collect Earth, as well as tools through LADA and WOCAT for validating data at local level, leading to greater consistency and reporting on LDN. Through projects and programs like IP Drylands and the Central Asia Countries Initiative for Land Management, CASIM2, funded by Jeff, FAO is working with parties to support LDN monitoring and meaningful reporting through Prize4. FAO is working with Conservation International and WOCAT to integrate FAO tools and provide support and capacity building to countries who need data sets and methodologies that produce land degradation maps that are representative across spatial scales and validated on the ground. Further, FAO's Global Soil Partnership continues to support countries in the preparation of soil organic carbon maps and the soil organic carbon sequestration potential maps. Countries have capacities to prepare national maps that can be used for measuring, reporting, and monitoring soil organic carbon dynamics and as contribution to LDN indicators. Thank you very much.
I thank the FAO for its statement. Distinguished delegates, I would now like to give the floor to the Secretariat to respond to the questions and comments which have been raised. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the delegations that have provided so many comments and feedback. You know, there were so many comments. We will distribute the responses, you know, through the various colleagues that are sitting here on the podium. I will start with trying to respond to the issues that came up with regard to capacity building. As you know, the capacity building activities are being basically funded through the Global Support Program that is funded by the Global Environment Facility. We have started, of course, you know, preparing the e-learning courses that we felt were needed because of the pandemic and the situation that we found ourselves, you know, that face-to-face meetings were not possible. I would like to highlight that, you know, for both the face-to-face meetings and the e-learning courses, you know, they're both pros and cons. I mean, you know, the face-to-face meetings were very good in terms of, you know, bringing the experts, you know, to a group of people at regional level. But, you know, the e-learning courses, for example, are very much, you know, geared towards engaging different stakeholders at national level, which means that there's a greater number of experts that we can actually reach with those tools and materials. The e-learning courses have now been posted on the capacity building marketplace. They will be translated into all UN languages, and we do hope that you know, with those e-learning courses, together with the numbers of consultants that we have, you know, put to the disposal of country parties using the help desk support system, that contact will be made with those consultants, and then you can have, you know, not face-to-face, but I mean Zoom meetings, you know, at your own disposal, that you can convene with those technical experts. Since capacity building activities are very much geared towards, you know, raising and enabling country parties to respond to the obligations of reporting that yourself set for by decisions of COP14. I will now give the floor to Adamu Buhari from UNEP, who is going to respond to the various questions that came up with regard to the enabling activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and distinguished delegates. Thank you so much for your question and the request of information, particularly related to the funding request to the Global Environmental Facility to report to support the reporting process. I would like just at the beginning to mention that the GEF support to the reporting process has two dimensions. There's what we call the global support program, which our colleague from Secretariat have just mentioned, Anya, which is really helping to develop tools to ameliorate the portal, and all this has been done because the project has been approved previously, which enabled the Secretariat to start putting together the guidelines and everything for the reporting. The second leg of the support from the GEF is related to the umbrella project. Yes, I quite agree with you that most parties have sent the request more than a year and there were no communication. The issue is there is a decision from our part and the GEF Secretariat to put the countries in the same conditions. So we welcome the request for the countries to have almost all the requests with us ready and then got the approval. And I am pleased to inform you that all the requests that have been sent to the GF on or before 13th of April of this year has been approved. And the resources will be available for the country to report. So from April 13, it was the deadline to submit, and we received the last letter of endorsement, I think, on 12th of April, and were able to include it to the package submitted to the GEF Secretariat. And the GEF CEO has approved this project the Friday, not this one, the other Friday. So I can say all the umbrella project has been approved. There were 121 country requests, which is a total amount of $12 million that are going to support the reporting process. From now that the project, the umbrella project has been approved, latest by tomorrow evening, all of you will receive an email from our colleague Eric, who is here behind me, to give you what are the necessary tools that or documents to be completed to access the resources. We are going also to copy your regional coordination aspects. So if by tomorrow evening you have not received the communication from our colleague Eric sending to you all the documentation that are needed, please refer to your regional coordination unit. They will send you the document, or they will liaise you with us so that we can send the document. One possible challenge that we may face, some of the country parties' request has been sent by the GF operational focal point. So it may be possible that we have the contact of the GF operational focal point, not the national UNCCD focal point. But in any case, the regional coordination unit will receive the message. So I will ask them to liaise with you to send those requests with you. And after the document are received, the guideline will be provided by Eric to you on how to fill it. So the earlier you fill the document you send to us, the earlier the resources will be available to the country. We'll engage in the agreement with the country and to provide the resources as much as possible, as soon as possible that we can treat the agreement. So please, it's very important that countries, parties, focal point be proactive in terms of giving the feedback to complete and fill the documentation that will be required. Tomorrow at 1 at Met 11, there will be a side event on this enabling activity, and the Job Secretariat will be there. We will be there. Our colleague from CI and FAO also will be there, who are doing some of the work related to these enabling activities. We will discuss largely on these enabling activities, and all the questions that you may have, we will be ready to address those questions. But also it's important to mention that yes, the resources are late, but till now the decision has to be taken on when will be the deadline. There are some indication from the past experience and from the convention guidance, but now till now there was no decision on when those reports should be submitted. So that's why I would like to request country parties, and one of the delegates has mentioned it here, is important to take into consideration the availability of the resources on fixing when the report is needed for the convention. So my colleague is Eric is here. Eric, can you stand up, please? So he will be available in the corridor, and unfortunately for this COP, we don't have office. In the previous COP, we used to have an office where we meet and discuss with you bilaterally. But please send an email or grab him anywhere if you want to sit down. He can take you through the template, the document that need to be filled, so that we'll ease the process. We would like really to see during this COP that all the explanation that the country parties need on how to complete the template, we will provide those information so that it will not be an issue of wasting time again. So we are all available, and thank you very much again. We are continuing to work together, and we have already met with some of annexes we discuss, and all those country annexes that need us to come to directly to their group meeting also to provide them with more information. We are available for it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And for the more technical questions, we will ask Brian to respond to start responding to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anya, for giving me the floor. I'll start with the delegate from the USA. In terms of the proposed new indicators in praise, they have been included, and we have communicated that to the COP Bureau that these would be included as a kind of a testing in the current reporting process, and that they would be adopted or not at the current COP. However, in our support materials, such as the reporting manual, we have made it clear that these are additional and optional indicators for the current reporting process. And we welcome your proposal to include text in the decision in the contact group to involve CSTs in adopting any new indicators. To your second question on the reporting, being a burden and taking away from attention on national to subnational planning. As you can imagine, at the Secretariat, we're limited in the resources that we can give to that very high level of detail in terms of planning. We do see GOLDN and its members as being key in helping countries at that level. We've also heard from the delegate at FAO of some excellent examples of tools which countries can use for national and subnational planning. So we would look to interagency advisory groups like FAO and the GOLDN partners to really engage with countries at the very detailed national, subnational level of managing their response to land degradation. For the delegate from Saudi Arabia, I would like to ask my colleague Sarah to please answer his question on how the outputs can be reviewed by the CST in terms of drought. Okay, I'll come back to you, Sarah, thank you. Next to India. India acknowledged the excellent points that you raised in your first intervention. You mentioned that a lot of default data had issues, and we believe in Praise 4, we have engineered it so that there is quite a nice balance between the use of the global default data, while countries can also now use national data in reporting. As you know, the default data can be deleted and replaced with national data. It can be simply modified, and a kind of a hybrid approach between the default and national data can be used, or it can be completely accepted as is. In terms of your second intervention on the duplication of effort, we acknowledge that the indicator on SO13 and trends in soil organic carbon has been again used in SO41 under Strategic Objective 4. The reason being that we currently lack a better indicator to monitor the co-benefits of implementing the convention in terms of carbon and biodiversity. So in the absence of a better carbon indicator, we are using the current temporary metric which we use under SO13, which is trends in carbon stock. And for that indicator, we're using the metric of carbon in the topsoil soil carbon. So we do hope that it is not to be seen as a duplication of effort, but hopefully a reduction in reporting burden for countries to have to report yet another carbon indicator under SO4. In terms of your intervention, India, on SO42, that is the red list index, being not at all specific. We do recognize that there are some challenges in the interpretation of the red list index. And as you may know, biodiversity is measured in 3 dimensions, and normally there are indicators on pressure, state and response. And we recognize that the red list index is an excellent indicator of the status of biodiversity in terms of a state indicator. And we have therefore introduced this potential new indicator under SO43 on response to the biodiversity crisis, and that is the extension of protected area coverage. That is an indicator which we will hope will boost the co-benefits of implementing the convention in terms of government's response to the biodiversity crisis in terms of increasing protected area coverage. I think your third point was about capacity building, and that has been covered already. To Syria, you asked what is the plan for 20 to 21 reporting. It is true that in this current reporting process we are asking for reporting to cover the period 2016 to 2019. It is feasible in Praise 4 to add additional years to the report, national report, by adding rows in the data entry reporting form. So there's nothing stopping you adding rows for 2020 to 2021 and reporting those years. However, those years will be more formally covered in the follow-on reporting process in 2026. To Laos, to the delegate from Laos, you raised the topic of soil erosion and soil organic carbon and how it is a challenge to measure accurately and needs expertise. We do have a soil organic carbon expert on our team of Praise reporting experts, so we would invite you to submit a ticket to the help desk outlining the nature of your query, and we can delegate that to our expert on soil organic carbon to assist you. To the delegate from Angola, I recognize the issues that you have had in accessing Praise 4. We acknowledge that there were some issues initially in our email server that even though it indicated that the email was sent to grant the user access credentials to Praise 4, there was some hiccups and it was not sending. We have now rectified that issue, and we do hope that there will be no more problems. However, I would be more than happy to sit down with a delegate from Angola to talk them through the process of logging into Praise 4. To the delegate from India, again, you made an intervention on no standards being available for land globally. I would like to point your attention toward some efforts in that direction by the FAO in terms of the LCCS, Land Cover Classification System, which they have published, which attempts to bring some standardization to how we classify land cover and land use. They've released an open source module which will allow you to classify your land classes down to a very high level of detail, and these are universally applied across the terrestrial land surface across the world. So we do hope that tools like the FAO LCCS can help you find some, bring some standards to the land classification system. However, in terms of your second intervention on the level of degradation severity needing also a classification system, this is indeed, it's a challenging area. We recognize that the SDG 15.3.1 methodology is an adopted and globally accepted methodology, but it does not look at the magnitude of land degradation or its severity. And we welcome more work in that direction at the Secretariat, and we will encourage and pursue more efforts in the lines of bringing standardization to how we measure land degradation severity. Ecuador, I recognize the delegate from Ecuador, I recognize your concerns expressed about uncertainty in international data sets used in Trans-Earth and how costly it is to do data collection. We also look to GOLDN as a key network of experts in this area who we hope can help introduce standards in how national data is collected in terms of SOC, soil organic carbon, land productivity, and other indicators of relevance to the Convention. With that, I conclude my statements. I believe my colleague from Trans-Earth would like to make a comment on the use of national data in Trans-Earth and how improvements have been made in that direction.
Thank you, Brian. There were a number of countries that had questions around the ability to integrate national level data sets in support of reporting, as Brian mentioned, and also my comment will relate to the question posed by Saudi Arabia on whether Trends.Earth provides accurate information. In terms of Trends.Earth as a tool, and I think this would apply to many other tools in this space as well, I would encourage countries to consider Trends.Earth, rather than considering it as a data set, to consider it as really a source of knowledge and an integrator of information. And our intent behind the tool is to provide access to agreed upon standard global data sets, but in every case to allow the replacement or the customization of those data sets such that they are more responsive to national context. And so that information could, of course, come from a range of different sources. It could be already existing national level data sets, which can be directly imported into Trends.Earth, and this is true for productivity, land cover, and soil organic carbon. Or, of course, it could be through the usage of Trends.Earth together with other tools, such as many that have already been mentioned by parties and from the podium, such as WOCAT, LandPKS, LADA, Open Forests. There are a number of different tools in this space. So in relation to the question from Saudi Arabia on whether Trends.Earth provides accurate information, I would just say that, again, it's essential that national experts be involved rather in the process, and that certainly I can say that within CI we recognize the need for capacity building on the integration of national level information within tools like Trends.Earth. And this is something that we do have some additional events that we are planning. These will be online events due to the pandemic, but we do recognize that need that has been raised for further capacity building in this area. Thank you, Brian. I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Alex. Sarah, would you like to make another intervention? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. I just would like to comment on a couple of points. First of all, in response to Saudi Arabia regarding Trends.Earth and the methodology used therein. All these methodologies are based on the good practice guidance for SDG indicator 15.3.1, and the document has been peer-reviewed by over 40 experts. Members of the Cric Bureau and members of the CST Bureau were both invited to contribute to that review process. So in that sense, we could consider the document as reviewed by the Committee on Science and Technology, or at least by its bureau. In response to the comment of India and the difficulties that they have faced in analyzing land productivity or in calculating land productivity data, I just would like to clarify that during the biennium, the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, which is the provider of the default data, has further improved the approach to land degradation, to land productivity dynamics calculation. They have now published the methodology. They have now made available an open source tool that allows for the calculation of land productivity dynamic, including using national data. So there is more transparency on the algorithm and the methods used. And our team of technical experts are ready to work with you and guide you through the process on how to use the national data. So this is in general an encouragement to all countries to make use of the expert team that we have in place. In a sense, I think they could be even more powerful than regional capacity building in person, because they are available for bilateral discussion with each and every one of you, and they are on call. You can contact them every day and ask for a bilateral meeting so that you can solve the specific issues you encounter in your country. Then I would like to briefly address the comment from Jordan and the need to align national strategies with the SDGs. In that sense, I would like to highlight that the Convention has integrated SDG target 15.3 into the implementation of the Convention, and we do have, of course, the 2018-2030 strategic framework that fully embraced land degradation neutrality under Strategic Objective 1. So in that sense, there is a need for all countries to adjust their national plan and their national activities to align with the SDG and with the new UNCCD strategic framework. I think this should be seen as an iterative process, of course, given the complexity of the issue at hand. Lastly, maybe a small comment. There was a comment from Cuba related to the sharing of best practices. And again, here I would like to remind that aside from reporting some narrative on best practices in praise, there is also, of course, the option to report more detail on these best practices in the VOCAT database. And then the last comment I wanted to address is the comments from Fiji that spoke a little bit on behalf of all Pacific Island countries and maybe more broadly of all small island developing states. I think we are aware of the specific circumstances of small island developing states when it comes to reporting and their specific needs. We have made attempts to make available higher spatial resolution data sets to those countries. And indeed, there have been considerable progress in that area. Just in terms of land cover, there are higher resolution data products that are available, but the limitations we still are facing is that they do not fulfill the reporting requirements in terms of time series land. And so the difficulty will remain for small island developing states to report in this cycle. There is a need to use national data and information, and we stand ready to work with you and see what it is feasible. But we hope for the next reporting cycle we may have some more concrete support to provide. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I thank the Secretariat for its comprehensive responses to the questions which have been raised. Delegates, we have thus concluded the general discussion on Agenda Item 3, entitled Improving the Procedures for Communication of Information, as well as the quality and formats of reports to be submitted to the Conference of the Parties. Distinguished delegates, I now invite the committee to continue its consideration of Agenda Item 2, entitled Effective Implementation of the Convention at National, Sub-Regional, and Regional Levels, and its sub-item D, entitled Integration of Sustainable Development Goal 15 and related Target 15.3 into the implementation of the Convention and land degradation neutrality. The documents for the item are listed in today's journal. I now give the floor to the representative of the UNCCD Secretariat, Mr. Sasha Alexander, to introduce the following reports. First, note by the Secretariat entitled Integration of Sustainable Development Goal 15 and related target 15.3 into the implementation of the United Nations Convention to combat desertification and land degradation neutrality, contained in document ICCD/Cric 20/7. And second, note by the Secretariat entitled Draft Decisions for Consideration at the 20th Session of the Committee for the Review of the Implementation of the Convention, as contained in document ICCD/Cric 20/10. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished delegates, I am pleased to introduce document ICCD Cric 20/7, entitled Integration of Sustainable Development Goal 15 and related target 15.3 into the implementation of the Convention and land degradation neutrality. This note describes the actions taken by the Secretariat and the Global Mechanism in response to the requests contained in Decision 3, COP 14, and ends with the conclusions and recommendations for consideration by the parties at the 20th session of the Committee for the Review of the Implementation of the Convention. Specifically, the note describes activities to develop partnerships to support the implementation of the Convention and land degradation neutrality. During 2020-2021 period, the Secretariat and GM continue to provide comprehensive technical and financial support to countries that have committed to setting their national voluntary LDN targets in collaboration with 18 international partners. Knowledge-sharing products containing the lessons learned and good practices help to further promote synergies and knowledge sharing among parties. As of December 2021, the LDN Target Setting Program has a total of 129 participating countries, 106 of which have successfully completed this voluntary process, and 100 which have published their national LDN reports on the UNCCD website. The Secretariat and the GM have also been collaborating closely with the Secretariat of the Global Environment Facility to support UNCCD implementation activities, as well as an enabling environment that promotes synergies with the other Rio conventions, with the aim of fostering co-benefits, contributing to the achievement of national priorities within the context of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration 2021-2030. Finally, it is important to note that the Changwon Initiative continues to be a key partnership contributing to various efforts to assist with LDN implementation. Secondly, the contribution to the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. The Secretariat submitted inputs to the HLPF 2021 focused on sustainable and resilient recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic that promotes the economic, social, and environmental dimensions of sustainable development, building an inclusive and effective pathway for the achievement of the 2030 Agenda in the context of the Decade of Action and the delivery for sustainable development. In addition, the Secretariat contributed to the high-level dialogue on DLDD, which was held on June 2021, organized by the President of the General Assembly to assess the progress made in the fight against DLDD and map the way forward in view of the end of the United Nations Decade for Deserts and the fight against desertification and the beginning of the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. 3, supporting parties in implementing and periodically reviewing and monitoring progress. As the custodian of SDG Indicator 15.3.1, the Secretariat contributed to the Secretary General's SDG Progress Report with a brief update on progress towards the implementation of the voluntary national LDN targets. Overall, global commitments to land restoration are estimated to amount to 1 billion hectares, of which 450 million hectares are covered by commitments through LDN targets. This overview points to the substantive work in progress by the parties and convention bodies on integrating SDG 15 and related Target 15.3, which have now been mainstreamed throughout the many of the work streams of the Secretariat and the Global Mechanism, and which are cross-referenced with other Cric documents for easy access to more detailed information. In accordance with Decision 32, COP14, the draft decision relevant to this agenda item is contained in ICCD Cric 20/10. I thank you for your attention.
I thank Mr. Alexander for his statement. At this point, are there any delegations that wish to make a statement in connection with the report that was just introduced? May I also remind that delegates wishing to take the floor, you're kindly requested to press the button on your microphone, and your microphone light will show green. In this way, your request is recorded. When you speak, the microphone light will turn red. If at any point in time you do not wish to speak any longer and you press the mic one more time, the green will come off. So the floor is now open. We invite delegates wishing to take the floor to press the microphone button and take the floor this time. Thank you. I recognize the distinguished delegate of Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the floor. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, Honorable Delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Edward Bendu. I'm the National Focal Point for the UNCCD Convention in Sierra Leone, and I belong to the Annex 1 countries. Mr. Chairman, the theme for this conference, Land, Life, Legacy, from scarcity to prosperity, is a call to action to ensure that land, our soils, and the organic carbon contents therein are the lifeline of our lives in this planet, which will benefit future, present, and future generations. We in the Annex 1 countries are presenting a position where we want to ensure that we create political and economic momentum and raise ambition, in particular in meeting the 2030 global commitments on restoration and robust actions that build the resilience of communities that are vulnerable to land degradation and drought. We are meeting in Abidjan against the backdrop of a stark warning issued by the UNCCD that up to 40% of all ice-free land is already degraded, with dark consequences for climate, biodiversity, and livelihoods. The conference is focusing on the restoration of 1 billion hectares of degraded land between now and 2020, future-proofing land use against the impacts of climate change, and tackling escalating disaster risks such as drought, sand and dust storms, and wildfires. The UNCCD is a global vision and voice for land. UNCCD unites government, scientists, policymakers, private sector, and communities around a shared vision and global action to restore and manage the world's land for the sustainability of humanity and the planet. Much more than an international treaty signed by 197 countries, UNCCD is a multilateral commitment to mitigating today's impacts of land degradation and advancing tomorrow's land stewardship in order to provide food, water, shelter, economic opportunity to all people in an equitable and inclusive manner. LDN is defined as a state whereby the amount and quality of land resources necessary to support ecosystem functions and services to enhance food security remain stable or increase within specified temporal and spatial scales and ecosystems. LDN provides a significant benefit in terms of mitigation and adaptation to climate change, halting and reversing land degradation that can transform land from being a source of greenhouse gas emissions to a carbon sink by increasing carbon stocks in soils and vegetation. Land degradation, the deterioration of or loss of the productive capacity of soils for present and the future, is a global challenge that affects everyone through food insecurity, high food prices, climate change, environmental hazards, and the loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services. The goal of LDN is to protect, maintain, restore, and enhance the land resource base and the ecosystem services that flow from there. Target 15.3 of the Sustainable Development Goals aims to achieve land degradation neutrality worldwide by 2030. Our submission as Annex 1 countries, therefore, is that land degradation should be integrated into SDG 15.3, which talks about life on land as a global policy. And our position also is that partnerships should be built, resource mobilization strategies should be developed, funding mechanisms from our multilateral agencies like the World Bank, GEF, GCF, Adaptation Fund, etc., now actively ensure that substantial amounts of funding be allocated for Annex 1 countries to receive substantial funding to scale up interventions to address land degradation, drought, sand and sandstorms, and wild bushfires in our various countries. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we in Annex 1 are strongly convinced that we owe this to present and future generations. Many countries in all the Annex countries are in dire need of funding to address this global vulnerability of our communities, especially with the stark reality of what COVID-19 has done to nations of the world. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Sierra Leone for his statement. I now recognize the distinguished delegate from the United States of America. USA, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The United States welcomes this discussion as we continue to expand our own efforts to avoid and reduce land degradation, in addition to restoring previously degraded lands. Our commitment to achieving the goals of this convention have been strengthened by a dramatically increased financial investment over the next 5 years in the management and restoration of dry lands in the United States, as well as other lands. We would like to reiterate that the UNCCD has been designated as the reporting entity for SDG 15.3. However, responsibility for implementation of activities designed to achieve this SDG continue to be distributed among a number of entities, and that the UNCCD, in the absence of a renegotiation and re-ratification of the Convention, is required to continue to focus its efforts on drylands. The United States remains concerned that expansion of activities, as indicated in several of the other draft decisions, may dilute and distract from efforts to address land degradation, desertification, and drought on dry lands. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate from the United States for his statement. I now recognize the distinguished delegate from the European Union, the EU. You have the floor.
Votre Excellence, Monsieur le Président du Cric.
Thank you so much, Chairman of the Cric, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I have the honor to make the statement on behalf of the European Union and its member states. The EU and its member states recognize that the report for setting up, or the program for setting up land degradation neutrality has created an important momentum for the implementation of the Convention. We recognize that the use of neutrality in terms of land degradation affords the parties an integrated framework for stepping up progress in terms of the fight against desertification, land degradation and drought, as well as various SDGs at national levels, and to ensure close cooperation with other conventions, inter alia, the Rio, and other relevant organizations. We underscore that the main challenge is the priority of future action, and for this we need to fine-tune the objectives that the states have set themselves. We stress the need to avoid overlap, incongruities in our efforts and in initiatives for the achievement of the land degradation neutrality objective, and to focus on existing partnerships as well as new partnerships which provide clear value added in terms of their impact. The European Union and its member states wish to underscore the need for planification for land use to avoid land degradation, as well as large-scale restoration of lands and ecosystems, sustainable in nature, beneficial for the poorest amongst us, and which will come associated with solid social and environmental guarantees. We call upon parties to set up programs with a systemic approach, multifaceted and multi-sectoral in nature, including long-term planification aimed not only at achieving land degradation neutrality objectives, but also to take into account, as part of an integrated approach, issues of gender, migration, and human development. The European Union and its member states wish to encourage cooperation and synergies with multilateral financial institutions, as well as the private sector, and civil society organizations at all levels, including at the local level, to back the implementation and follow-up of the objectives and initiatives in the field of land degradation neutrality, with solid social and environmental guarantees. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate from the European Union for his statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished delegate from China. China, you have the floor.
谢谢主席，感谢秘书处的介绍。联合国防治荒漠化土地。
Thank you so much. Now, the UN high-level dialogue on combating DLDD was successful and has enabled us to improve the standing of the convention. The Director General of the State Forestry and Grasslands Administration, Mr. Wu, participated in the event. China cherishes the hope that other parties will actively participate in such important international events. In its fight against DLDD, China has explored and developed a number of proven technologies and models for prevention and control. China is willing to share these experiences to promote mutual learning and will continue to actively support the work of the International Center for Knowledge Management on Desertification, which was set up jointly by China and the UNCCD Secretariat. China will continue to actively support the work of the International Center for Knowledge Management and Desertification in the fight against land degradation. Now, regarding the resolution and its paragraph on financing, others in a position to do so was mentioned after developed states. This is a serious confusion regarding the nature and responsibilities of developed and developing countries with regard to financing. And this will have a negative impact on the conventions of other countries and should be deleted. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate from China for his statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished delegate from Bangladesh. Bangladesh, you have the floor.
Honorable Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon. First of all, on behalf of Bangladesh government and on my own behalf, please accept my felicitations and thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, land is a valuable natural resource which connects 3 Rio Conventions covering desertification and land degradation, biodiversity, and climate change. Sustainable land management can play a significant role to attain their goals as well as targets. Moreover, a good number of sustainable development goals have powerful connections with the land and land management and trade-off between sustainability aspirations often take place on land. We would like to achieve the sustainable development goals, especially SDG 15 and more specifically SDG 15.3 aligned with UNCCD. We should work together in this regard. It's true that land restoration is a cost-effective strategy which can ensure green recovery. It offers a wide range of pathways towards a green recovery as well as attaining sustainable development goals. Land restoration can also create green jobs, uplift peripheral people, promote gender balance, support huge co-benefits for human and environmental health, biodiversity, and tackle climate change. We should work together so that evolving and shifting patterns of production and consumption cannot further drive land degradation, rather benefit people and planet for prosperity and people. Mr. Chair, the loss of soil, flora and fauna and ecosystems navigate the intermixed crisis of desertification, land degradation, biodiversity loss, drought and climate change. Unmanaged plastic is a serious threat for human health, environmental health, flora and fauna. Most of these unmanaged plastic waste turns into microplastics affecting life on land, water, and marine life. We should stop single-use plastic without further delay. Ladies and gentlemen, forced migration of 1 million people from neighboring country to our country has created enormous threat to our life, land, and environment, biodiversity, forest, and ecosystems. I draw the kind attention of international community to solve the issue in order to combat land degradation and to reverse biodiversity loss. Mr. Chair, climate change-related risk and vulnerability are occurred through a number of channels, such as land degradation, drought, desertification, soil erosion, riverbank erosion, depletion of soil fertility, soil pollution, water pollution, coastal salination, etc. All these adversely affect the population, particularly women, and tend to lose their lives and livelihood. We know that the central principle of the Sustainable Development Goal is inclusivity. It includes a commitment to leave no one behind and to endeavor to reach the farthest behind first. We should work together to promote gender equity. We should have a better, effective, and efficient coordination with Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention, as well as UNCCD, UNCBD, and UNFCCC. Distinguished delegates, Bangladesh has formulated a number of policies, rules, and regulations to combat land degradation, desertification, drought, to tackle climate change, to protect and preserve environment and biodiversity. We have introduced best practices of SLM technology for fast-growing crops, vegetables, and fruits. Mr. Chair, with its limited resources, Bangladesh is trying to its best. At the same time, Bangladesh is encouraging and welcoming global cooperation and support in this perspective. Mr. Chair, I thank you. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Bangladesh for his statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Côte d'Ivoire. Côte d'Ivoire, you have the floor.
Merci, Président.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Now, with land degradation neutrality, in the field of land degradation neutrality, we have elaborated a number of objectives. And we feel that we are moving forward as part of the objectives we have set ourselves under the Convention from 2021 to 2030. However, to achieve our objectives, we will require resources. We will require the resources that are necessary to do so. And we have seen that in terms of climate change, a Green Climate Fund was created. At the level of land degradation neutrality, we are talking about the Land Degradation Neutrality Fund. Funds which we have sought to mobilize for a long time now. And a great many times we were told that the funds are available. But I don't know. Who in this room has been able to successfully apply and receive these funds? So I'm going to reiterate what we have said from the very beginning. These funds have to be genuinely made available. We need to be able to receive these funds to enable us to achieve the objectives which we have set ourselves back in 2018. Failing this, we will not be successful. We're going to continue to chase a pipe dream, phantom funds which don't exist, and we simply will not achieve our objectives. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Côte d'Ivoire for his statement. Are there any other delegates who wish to take the floor? I recognize the distinguished representative of India. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. For UNCCD, LDN is one of the most important indicators for achieving its restoration projects across the globe, across the country, and for for UNCCD is one of the main strategic objectives. So therefore, LDN has been one of the key drivers and the main strategic objective for the UNCCD. And under the LDN, land degradation target setting projects, more than now 120 to 130 countries have joined, and I hope that all the country party will join the LDN TSP program. India in the 2018 at orders China joined the LDN project, LDN TSP project, and we are committed by 2030 we will restore and we will achieve LDN target by 2030. At the same time, India is committed for the bond challenge. Initially, our bond challenge was 21 million hectares by 2030, but during the COP14, our Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, announced a more ambitious target, enhanced it by 5 more millions, and now our restoration project for land restoration by 2030 is 26 million hectares, and we are on path to achieve it. For last 5 years, our land restoration has been more than 9.8 million hectares, and we are on target to achieve our land restoration projects. And we have so many projects across the countries which are targeted for enhancing forestry, agricultural, pasture land, wetland, and all kind of land which we want to restore, which has been degraded. In our country, almost 29% of our land has been degraded, and we, through various projects and programs, we intend to restore those degraded land. Under the Saudi Arabia presidency, G20, India was among the countries which supported restoration of 1 billion hectares of land by 2030. And India was also supportive of 1 trillion trees initiative launched during 2020 at World Economic Forum as a platform for government, business, and civil society to provide to the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. During COP14, our Prime Minister announced that India is going to set up a Center of Excellence for Sustainable Land Management for South-South Cooperation for its own projects and programs for the country, and to monitor and evaluating and coming up with the scientific management of land. At the same time, use the knowledge and best practices it has in land management under the South-South cooperation with any countries or like-minded countries who are interested in sharing our knowledge. These are the initiatives from India. Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much.
I thank the distinguished delegate of India for his statement. I now recognize the distinguished delegate from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC. You have the floor.
Voilà. Okay. Merci.
Thank you so much, Chairman, for affording me the floor. My name is Jean-Yves Ilunga Moneg. I'm the focal point for the convention in the DRC. And as this is the first time that I take the floor within the framework of this meeting, I would like to convey my gratitude to both the people and government of Côte d'Ivoire, as well as to thank the UNCCD for having been so kind to organize this meeting. In the DRC, within the framework of the LDN program, we have defined a number of national objectives. And we also updated our national plan of action based on the 2018-2030 strategy. Now, as far as LDN is concerned, we are aware that we need to move on to the next stage in terms of the implementation of these national objectives to ensure that we incorporate them into our national development plans. We also need to raise awareness regarding them. We're also aware that SDG 1315 focuses on synergies between the fight against desertification, the fight against climate change, and the protection of biodiversity. However, the incorporation of LDN into all this presupposes the availability of appropriate resources. And for this reason, we welcome the help of the Convention and the help of some of our partners aimed at achieving our objectives. This is also an opportunity for us to again thank all of our partners who have assisted us as part of this process. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate from the Democratic Republic of the Congo for his statement. I now recognize the distinguished delegate from Nigeria. Nigeria, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you so much, Chairman. As this is the first time that Niger takes the floor, we would like to thank you and to congratulate you upon your appointment to chair this session. So, as I said, it's Niger, not Nigeria. My name is Boubacar. I'm a member of the delegation of Niger. This delegation would also like to reiterate its gratitude to the government of Côte d'Ivoire for this very warm welcome afforded to us, and we'd also like to thank the Secretariat of the Convention for the high quality of the presentations they have shared with us. Chair, our country is one of the countries in Africa whose land is most severely impacted by the phenomenon of land degradation and drought. Aware of its negative impacts, Niger has developed, and we did things a long time before the advent of the Convention, a number of plans and programs for the fight against desertification. And as part of the implementation of this Convention, Niger has drawn up its national plan of action for the fight against desertification, our strategic framework for sustainable land management, our drought plan, our strategy for guidelines in terms of land degradation neutrality, and we have also defined our voluntary objectives and a number of other documents which have all taken into account previous acquis and new developments as part of a participative approach aimed at further mobilizing our populations for a more effective endeavor. So, following this awareness-raising effort, backed up by political will, the fight against desertification has for 2 decades now been a priority for our country at the highest levels of the state. And we have committed ourselves in terms of land degradation neutrality to restore 213,000 hectares per year. Chair, the context in which our program of action has been implemented over these last few decades was one which was marked by significant trends in terms of political and institutional change. And as well as socio-political issues. And we have the implementation of the 3N initiative, Nigerians, Feeding Nigerians. And this is all part of the program of action on climate change and so forth. And then, of course, we also had the COVID-19 pandemic. These were all concerns which feed our deliberations as part of the political dialogue. So these are all concerns which prompt us to be at the very heart of this dialogue, and this is why we welcome the new strategic framework on drought, as well as Target 15.3 of the SDGs, and we do this with a great deal of enthusiasm. And of course, we hope to see the setting up of the Land Degradation Neutrality Fund. Chair, we must also come up with strong arguments to convince all of the socio-political stakeholders that the fight against desertification, against land degradation and climate change remains the very cornerstone of our fight against poverty, food insecurity, climate change, and sustainable development. To do this, we must possess the requisite capacities to be able to better express the link between all of these new parameters to ensure that we forge the necessary synergies between the indicators for the elaboration of 13.4, especially concerning carbon indicators. A challenge to be met, sir, is to bolster our resources to fight against desertification, whether internally or externally, by devoting a part of our national budget to this, while ensuring coherence in terms of donor pledges and disbursements. We also have to better take into account environmental concerns of plans of action at local and national levels to ensure that there is cohesiveness between the various reports. We must also engage in further communication with all stakeholders to set up a toolbox to ensure that the new decentralized entities are able to work together. We also have to be able to account for progress achieved in a reliable way, as well as its impact on the living conditions of our populations to ensure that we better target our action. All of these are priorities which need to be met. Sir, this clearly shows that we cherish the hope that states will be assisted in the elaboration of their reports and accounts. This process should not be considered to simply be a technical exercise, given what is at stake. For this reason, it requires all of our attention in terms of capacity building of national coordination institutions to ensure that we're able to meet the challenges that we and they are facing. And this will probably require more substantial resources to be mobilized. By way of conclusion, sir, we believe that the indicators should be targeted at the best way in which we can help stakeholders to meet the challenges which are emerging. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Niger for her statement, and I apologize for the error in the correct name of the country earlier. I now recognize the distinguished delegate of Bahrain. Bahrain, you have the floor.
Bangladesh.
Bangladesh, I'm sorry. We are having some difficulties between the screen and the flags. I'm very sorry about that, delegates. Bangladesh, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor again. At the beginning, I would like to quote one statement made by the current presidency of the COP. During delivering his speech, he said that nature is speaking and we are not listening. Following this, I should say nature is crying and we are not listening. If this continues, then we will be nowhere. For example, in Bangladesh, we have estimated that if we want to attain land degradation neutrality, then about more or less 20 billion USD will be required. We are talking about the LDN fund, but we do not know how much money will be required, what kind of technical support will be required. We do not know. So my opinion is we should assess very urgently how much resources we required for LDN. Otherwise, we cannot attain LDN at the end. So this is very much urgent that we need to assess the resource we need for attaining LDN target. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Bangladesh for his statement. I now recognize the distinguished delegate of Laos. Laos, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for giving me a chance again to talk in the Cric. Actually, in Laos, we have the National Socio-Economic Development Plan. And this plan is, the indicator is linked with the SDG already. And I'm sure that the SDG 15.3 is linked to our national plan. And when Laos we are develop the LDN target, we also according to the national socio-economic plan. So for this context, if the Secretariat of UNCCD can work with us on the target that we are set in the LDN and the indicator of SDG 15.3 that they have, and also our national socio-economic plan that we already have. I think it already linked, but it's we have to do we have to see that the report that we are do in the when we report to the UN, how to develop the report and write it how to link the report of three reports together. So that I'm request from the UNCCD Secretariat that work closely with Laos on developing the report. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Laos for her statement. I now recognize the distinguished delegate from the Republic of Tanzania. Tanzania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tanzania is among the countries in Africa which are highly affected by land degradation. About 61% of the country is already prone to land degradation, and 16% is already highly degraded. Tanzania has prepared its LDN report and has set a target of restoring 5.2 million hectares under LDN targets. Tanzania has also integrated issue of land restoration and the SDG 15 into its national environmental policy, and it has also incorporated issue of land restoration and SDG 15 into national action plan for combating desertification. Tanzania has also initiated various initiatives to restore land, including tree planting, which are currently implemented, mainly depending on local resources. Tanzania expects to secure additional resources to implement SDG 15 and attain its 5.2 million target for land restoration from the convention and the other sources of international community. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Tanzania for his statement. I now recognize the distinguished delegate from Mauritania. Mauritania, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La Mauritanie, mon pays.
Thank you so much, Chair. Mauritania is a country that is well known to be exposed to desertification and drought for a long time now, and in a way which is a lot more intense than most countries around the world. This has been one of our major problems since the 1970s, and for this reason we have techniques for protecting the environments and the advance of sand dunes. And a number of other countries have come to learn from our experience. Today, we have an agricultural potential of over, agricultural lands of over 500 hectares, which are currently being invaded by sand dunes. And this leads to the population leaving their lands, forced to do so as the sand dunes progress. So the agricultural potential, which is the lifeblood of our society and our existence, is threatened, and all of the people living in our country are threatened as well. It is with a great deal of attention that I have followed all of the statements which have been made, but I'm amongst those who believe that the protection of the environment, the conservation of the environment requires solid food security. And I'm from the Ministry of Agriculture. This involves a setting up of environmental areas, each with the right agricultural techniques, where man is living in harmony with nature. And what needs to be done to achieve this is to receive the necessary financing. Financing which has been allocated for this task. In all of the states of the Third World, you will find that the states who enjoy grants from the international community in this field and I'm especially referring to countries of the Sahel region. Well, these countries don't have a great many resources, they don't receive a great many resources, and so we're not able to present projects. And this means that those who pollute the most are the ones who possess the state-of-the-art technologies and the financing. So I call for a bolstering of national capacities for the countries who require them most. Second aspect, there are pieces of software that deal with land degradation and the situation in this field. And I believe that we need to study soils more so that the ways to restore the lands are more effective. So we know how to deteriorate the lands, but if we know what the composition of our lands is, then we can come up with land use plans which will enable us to protect our lands. And we're going to use plans and techniques which are compatible with the area and make sure that our lands are fertile. The third aspect I wanted to touch on is regarding the various environmental areas in our countries. It needs to be done so we understand which plants and pesticides, for example, need to be used in the different environmental areas. All of this is knowledge which stands to help us to enhance productivity while respecting the environment. Thank you, sir.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Mauritania for his statement. That has brought us to the end of the speakers who have requested the floor thus far. I now recognize the distinguished delegate from the Gambia. Gambia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. My name is Momodu, and I work in the Ministry of Environment in the Gambia. The Gambia has developed the National Drought Plan, and this is meant to combat desertification. It has also started to work on the LDNs with a view to making sure that many communities are able to participate. The LDN is a key driver in our work on climate change response under the SDG 15.1. tree plants. There are many interventions taking place by government, which has also developed a plan of action whereby it seeks to provide 200,000 hectares of land to communities, transferring them for their own management and supervision. There are a lot of important interventions carried out by government as well as civil society organizations. The challenge, however, is access to resources. The Green Climate Fund is hardly made available. You can hardly notice it on the ground where the people are suffering. We are part of a regional group working on the Least Development Countries Initiative for Effective Adaptation and Resilience. That one is meant to make sure that resources get to the vulnerable people, the most vulnerable people, in the quickest and most efficient way. Because as I said, these funds, the climate funds, are not being realized on the ground, at community level. So we have come up with this project that seeks to hasten and improve the delivery mechanism so that using the whole of society approach, so that many people, almost everyone who is affected by climate change and land degradation would be supported. These are the issues that we have on hand. But the government action plan is highly recognized, and it is considered to be to support communities to have a stable, secured, and a sustainable land management system. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished delegate from the Gambia for his statement. With no further requests from the floor, I will now ask the Secretariat to respond to any comments and questions which were raised. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Louise Baker. I'm the Managing Director of the Global Mechanism. I'm responding for the Secretariat today. Some very rich observations, some very rich comments that we look forward to exploring with you further. Just 2 points to respond to specifically, if I may. One around the private sector, and it was mentioned several times, the LDN fund. The Land Degradation Neutrality Fund is a private sector fund for access by private sector entities. It is not available for the use of parties. However, we're now beginning to see a pipeline of quite interesting private sector initiatives taking place in a diverse range of geographies around the world. In terms of funds available for land degradation, I would note that there's just been a successful GEF 8 replenishment where there's a dedicated focal area for land and flexibility on STAR allocations for the consideration of parties. In terms of the indicators, I would say that the indicators for SDGs and for voluntary LDN targets are the same. This should help with mainstreaming into your SDG plans, with reporting to UNCCD, and also in that sense with taking your report for UNCCD and using that for SDG reporting as well. Our objective in this regard is to streamline the process and also make it easier to access funding. We have received requests from 74 countries for support in the development of transformative projects and programs emanating from the LDN process. And so there is scope for additional parties to request support in developing bankable projects. I think I'll probably stop there, Mr. President. Thank you so much.
I thank the distinguished delegate from the Secretariat. I thank the Secretariat for its comments. And we have thus concluded the general discussion of Agenda Item 2, Sub-Item D. Distinguished delegates, we've concluded our program of work for this morning. The committee will reconvene this afternoon at 3 p.m. sharp in order to continue consideration of its Agenda Item 2, effective implementation of the convention at national, sub-regional, and regional levels, sub-item E. The meeting is now adjourned.